Okay, so welcome to part 6 of Switch on Your Brain. Today we are going to be going over, last week I told you we were going to kind of breeze over chapter 8 for you to read it on your own because it was so sciencey and there was this big graphic that she's made explaining her research. And then we were going to kind of touch on chapters 9 and 10 on what the 21-day detox is, how it works, and getting into that. Although I picked up the book and I was really reading through 8, and I'm like, no, we have to talk about it. So we're actually going to buzz through 8, 9, and 10 so we can stay on track. I will try to not side rail too much. And if you have read it or if you have your book, I've kind of, again, like I always do, I've highlighted through and just going to hit on the important, because she repeats over and over to not do this in a hurry in terms of when you understand the first 7 chapters and how the brain works, it makes it so much more intentional when you do the 21-day, because the 21-day we're going to be doing on our own, right? And we can start a chat to have, when we can call it 21-day brain detox, just for those of us that have, walked through this and are doing it as encouragement and how's it going and some of the things that we're dealing with. But she just says, don't hurry through the first part, because if you don't really grasp how powerful this is, you will struggle a little bit through the 21 days, because it's really easy to get to day 4 to 7 and then, fall off the wagon like we do with anything else, whether that be exercising or eating, right? And so she wants us to have a good understanding. So let's go through chapter 8. 8 is on that science of thought, and she explains her research and her theory. Now, we're not going to go through every single step, but I'll try to make it as clear as possible for those that don't have the book. So at the top, like always, her linked science concept is the non-conscious mind is where 99.9% of our mind activity is. It's the root level that stores the thoughts, the emotions, the perceptions, and it impacts the conscious mind. So everything that we say and do, and that goes back to her talking about everything that happens in life first started as a thought, which is why renewing the mind is so important. So she says the brain is not an input-output machine. As much as I read this, I still was like, what? I still thought it still seems like what you put in, right, goes out and other way around. And I was actually still shocked after all these chapters to read that. She says you're not an input-output machine. You're not a computer mirroring the outside world. Your brain is designed to respond to your mind. So that's really neat, because that goes back to how we were created and why the constant importance of renewing the mind. She says the power of your thought life, when you understand the power of your thought life, which has been the emphasis of the whole first 7 chapters in the book, you truly begin to get a glimpse of how important it is to take responsibility for what you're thinking. So thinking, right, it's a creative force, and it can go 2 ways. It can either be a huge, huge blessing, or it can be a curse, right? Depending on how you use it. And the really neat thing about this is you get to determine that. Nobody else determines that for you. So we've all had childhood and adult issues, and some of that from choices that other people have made, right? Often parents. But the beauty about that is they don't determine what we get to choose going forward. That's just a mere brings us to who we are today, the experiences. Yes, we develop some mindsets, but it's just the beauty of we still are in control. We get the power to choose. So there's different areas. She says there's 3 levels in her schematic on the next 2 pages, and that schematic is on 126 and 127. To be honest, I haven't fully looked at all her writing in there, but I do plan to check it out. So the first one is the non-conscious metacognitive level. So that one's on the far left of the drawing. And she says this is where 90 to 99% of the action in the mind is actually taking place. So it's your thinking and your thought building. It operates at about 400 billion actions per second. I can't even comprehend that number. Isn't that crazy? 400 billion, like who even counts that? I don't even know how they figure that out. And it drives the conscious cognitive level. So it's highly, highly important, and it operates 24 hours a day. So this is where she was talking about, right, in that in that unconscious, even when you're sleeping, the things that you've built up in there are still working and determining what's going on in life. The second one is the conscious cognitive level. Okay, so in the middle of her drawing, it's where up to 10%. So are you guys grasping what I was awestruck at? 90 to 99% is happening when you're unconscious, and only 10% is taking place when you are conscious. So going back to the power of sleep, Probio 5 and Mega X, making sure that you're sleeping well and deep and resting. She says it operates at about 2,000 actions per second. So do you see the slowdown? A really big slowdown compared. So often, do anyone wake up tired sometimes? Yeah. Because you're revving at 400 billion actions per second while you're sleeping and only like 2,000 when you're awake. So it's much slower and is controlled. And I like the word controlled because it's slower, but we have control over what's happening. Whereas when you're unconscious, you don't. And that's what makes the daytime so important when we are aware. So it operates only when we're awake. That's second level. The third one is the symbolic action level, and it incorporates all 5 senses. So that's the one that typically when we think of mindset and outcomes in life and goals, we typically think of the symbolic level because you think of what I see, what I hear, what I taste, what I smell. And actually, she says what that one just does is it serves as the contact between the world and ourselves. And it's like the inside of the mind, right? That internal realm. So she says the information comes in through our 5 senses, and it's received consciously by that conscious cognitive level. That's a lot of C words. And then it passes through the non-conscious. Okay, so it passes through that first level, and then that's where that 90 to 99% is happening. So it becomes a physical thought as a result of genetic expression. So this is where she was talking about that neuroplasticity and how our thoughts and all these things have the ability to change what's going on in the brain, the actual genetic structure. So that's when it moves from that cognitive, that conscious cognitive to the non-conscious. So she gets into the 21-day brain detox. So she says, whatever you think about most is going to grow. Makes sense. And the cycle moves with a particular thought, the stronger that it grows. So I've noticed this in myself. There's a couple thought hang-ups that I have, and they've been there for a while, and I've been trying to be like, why does it never go away? And you don't like that it's there, and you try to be positive, and you try to like, no, I know that's not truth, and you try to grab it, but it still stays there. It's just like built in. So this book is making a lot of sense to me because I allowed myself to think it too many times. It's now hardwired. So it's just like in the Bible somewhere it says, I think it's Paul, where he says, why do I continue doing the things that I know that I don't want to do? And it's because of the hardwire, right? So we're going to get over that. She says it takes around 21 days of the cycling for all the necessary protein changes. So this is actual like biological, genetical changes in the body happen. She says, so it takes 21 days for all the necessary protein changes to happen to create a long-term integrated memory. Super neat. You can't just apply a thought once and think that change has happened. It takes repeated work. And that's where we usually fall off the rails. Because we are we are a fast food, quick fix nation. We want things now, and if we don't see it in 3 days, right? Like, oh, my Slim didn't make me lose weight in the first 6 days. I'm out. Okay, it's the same thing with we want fast change, but that's actually not our reality. It takes time, and here she's saying at least 21 days. So each day, something is happening to the thought in your non-conscious mind. So remembering, as we're going to go through this 21 days, you're not going to be able to see, feel, sense, whatever that is, the changes that are going on deep inside at a neurological level. So she says if you stop at day 4 or 5, which is often where people give up, I'm at fault. That is right. Usually around day 4 or 5, you're like, nah, on to the next thing. She says the consequence will be that the memory denatures, which means it dies and becomes heat energy. Simply put, you forget. And you go on to the next thing, right? So you actually just wasted your 4 or 5 days because it literally just dissipates. The heat energy thing was very interesting to me because I just got sent, I'm going to rabbit trail for 1 second, especially as women here. I just got sent a group, if you've ever heard of thermography, as an alternative to having mammograms. Okay, so thermography is amazing. It works best if you can get a baseline. The younger, the better. You get a baseline because we'll have different heat areas in the body. And when cancer grows, for example, it makes a hot spot. And so when you have a baseline thermography of the whole body, then you begin, I see lots of you nodding like you've heard of this before, right? Before the cancer even develops into something that's now out of control, those hot spots can be detected and you can do early prevention, and typically you can curb what's going to happen. So I got a message that apparently in Manitoba, the government has shut down the few thermography clinics we had, but there's a couple ladies in Niverville that are bringing in a thermography specialist or mobile clinic from BC. So when I read this, I was like, that is fascinating. So the same thing happens in our thoughts with the heat. Very interesting how we are created. So she says, remember, we can't control the events and circumstances around us, right? None of us can, but we can choose. We can choose what we do with it, how we react, and reaction is the key. You guys been much more aware. I've been much more aware on how I'm reacting and responding, and how much I'm milkshake multitasking, and how when I'm milkshake multitasking, actually I never noticed before, but sometimes my brain actually hurts right here. Like an eyebrow thing. I'm really, really highly acutely aware of that now. And when my kids come in to talk to me, especially in this room, it's probably the worst place for them to talk to me because that's usually where I'm working of any sort. I'm actually really trying to turn my whole body on the chair, and I have to breathe because it's hard for me to not keep typing because I'm like, yeah, I can hear you. I can do 2 things at once. I'm actually trying to turn and look at them and just stop because it's like, okay, Heidi, just 30 seconds. It's okay, right? I can finish that message in a minute. But it's interesting how consciously aware I'm becoming, and I'm very thankful. So back to the 5 senses. She says that's on that symbolic, right, level. So our 5 senses activate an emotional response almost immediately. But if we don't take the time to process them, the unprocessed emotion is going to dominate. So, when we teach our kids not to hold up their emotions, right? Like, it's okay, talk about it, tell me about it. That really goes into here where she's talking about how if we don't deal with it, it will dominate itself, whether we like it or not. And so I really like that. I have a big star next to the next paragraph. So we're on the middle of page 129. Satan tries to take advantage of the pull of the 5 senses through this symbolic level. And he would love it if you would respond impulsively to them. But you're made in God's image with the mind of Christ, and Jesus told his disciples that all power had been given to him. If all power was given to Jesus, how much power does Satan have? None. We give him way more power than he deserves. He has none. Says it. When you truly let that sink in, you realize that you control your reactions, your thoughts, your thinking, right? How you're responding. So what lies are we believing? It really comes down to it because everything, right? We are hanging on to lies and we're allowing them to take root. So it's important. It's through the senses that we receive Satan's lies, but this is really important that you don't have to believe them. So back to my anxiety journey when someone freed me and said, a thought is merely a thought until you actually put it into action. So it's okay if they're scary. It's only a thought, right? Don't allow those thoughts to scare you. Take them captive and realize that is a lie. That is not who I am. That's not what I'm created to be. That's not what my goals are. That's not the kind of mom I am, right? It's just a lie. And so she says, what this also means that if we listen to and believe the enemy's lies, though, we actually choose to process them into physical realities. That's actually scary. It's scary what happens on that level. As soon as you take it in and give it that, it's like you're putting fuel on that fire, you're just giving it a little bit, it takes a root and it starts to manifest. So she says, we do not have to believe Satan's lies. We as humans create the evil when we collapse the probabilities into actualities. And so you hear a lot of people saying, well, God created everything, so he created evil too. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. That is Satan's realm. Evil doesn't come from God, obviously. God gave us the power to create, right, our choices. And good and evil come through choices that we have made. That's why we're at where we're at. And it's okay. We wake up every day brand new and we get to choose different and be better. And that's what the beauty of it is. So what this is called is self-directed neuroplasticity. So that's that changing, how you can change your brain. It's self-directed. That puts a lot of responsibility on us, but a lot, you can see it two ways, right? You can see it as a like, oh my gosh, that's just such a huge overwhelming task, or you can see it as energetic and all the possibilities that you have for yourself that you get to choose. So she says positive plasticity produces positive behavior, and then of course the opposite would be true, right? That negative plasticity will produce negative behaviors, but we can change them. So she says when we distort love and truth, we wire this perversion into our brains, and in essence, we actually create brain damage. Isn't that a little bit?
Sorry, Heidi.
Siri's talking. Isn't that interesting? Like it's actual brain damage. So remember when we read back in a few chapters ago where she was saying, you know, with Alzheimer's and dementia, because now when we're milkshake multitasking and we're doing all these things now at this age, that's actually creating brain damage to the cells. And later on in life, that's where we start seeing that start to play out. And it's the same thing with gut health. If you take care of your gut now, the chances are much, much less that you're going to run into scary diagnoses when you are, I don't know, it's getting younger and younger. Let's just say 45, 50, 65, 70, right? Where you start hearing, oh, now I have to take medication because my blood pressure's up or my cholesterol's high or my this or my that. I'm starting to get arthritis, right? If you take care now, it's helping for later. Very well worth the time. So she says, for example, when we're talking about this kind of brain damage and because of thoughts that were allowed and actions that we're letting happen, OCD, she says, right? So someone with OCD, they're constantly, they remain in this toxic, obsessive, worrying thought pattern. And she says what happens is the brain on scans and studies actually shows damage and incorrect firing from that constant worrying. So it's shooting off different neurons and chemicals in the brain, which is affecting, of course, many other levels in different parts of the body. And so it's no joke when we're helping our kids. It's not enough to say, oh, don't worry about it. Teach them how. Teach them how to recognize, like, yeah, you know what? I have that thought. Yeah, it's a little bit scary. One of my daughters is going back to school in fall. She's nervous about it. It's new. I said, but you know what? It's okay. We're going to do it together. Yes, it is normal. We have been home for 5 years. It is normal that you are nervous about what this is going to look like. So validate, but then direct what she's going to do with it instead of, right? And that's the same as adults. So definitely validate it. Don't be like, oh, that's not for real. No, the thought's real. It's there. But grab it and then make sure that we send it down the right funnel. At the bottom of 131, where she starts talking about the 21-day brain detox plan. So she says the reason it was designed was to help improve your thinking and choices and subsequent happiness and health. It's our choices that create healthy thought universes, right, in our brain. And then it turns these powerless lies into toxic thought universes in the brain. So what she's saying, sorry, I read that a little bit wrong, is that we can create both. We can create a happy, healthy, brain universe, I'm going to call it, or we can create a toxic environment in our brain universes. So she says it's the incredible power that God gave us to be able to think and choose and create our reality. So on page 32 and 132 and 133, she talks about automation. And that is, she gives the example of like riding a bike and how this works, and it's the same for thoughts. So she says after a period of repeated thinking about a choice for over 2 or 3 cycles of 21 days. So this 21-day thing isn't something you're going to only do once and never look at again. you're actually going to do it over and over and over because you can only deal with one thought at a time. And it takes 21 days to unplug, unwire, and put in a new one. And so it's not like a one-time deal and then we are good. We're going to be working on this. It's something we're learning now as a technique to use forever and ever, basically. So she said during that 2 or 3 cycles, because sometimes it takes a little while if a thought's really ingrained, she says the new thought moves into the non-conscious metacognitive level where it becomes part of our internal perception. That's what we want. We want to create a new one and we want to bring it into reality in terms of it being hardwired in and replacing. So that process is called someone say it, automatic, we're going to say. So when riding a bike, she says it's like when you're learning to ride a bike, right? The first few times you're super wobbly, but you are determined, right? When your kids are like, I am taking those training wheels off and I'm going to ride my bike. It's messy. You're wobbling all over the place, but consciously you are working at learning this new skill. You're making an active choice. I'm getting on the bike. Mom and dad said, I got to push those pedals, right? It's going to be wobbly, but I got to look straight ahead and hold on to the handlebars and you're going to wipe out. But as you learn to ride your bike, it moves from the cognitive where you're choosing to now you can get on a bike and you're not thinking about, okay, I got to start with the one pedal up and then, right, give it a go and then pedal and eyes forward. You do it naturally. You do it unconsciously. You can ride your bike with your eyes closed and the same thing happens in the thought processes. So she said this whole automation is a life principle. So she says it applies to everything in your life because everything you do and say is first a thought. And it means that nothing happens until you first build that thought. So it produces, right, the actions, the words, the behaviors, everything that we have. The non-conscious part of the mind is filled with the thoughts that you've been building since you were in the womb. In the womb. Crazy. Up to 99% of decisions you make are based on what you've already built and what's become automatic in your mind. 99%. So what you do today is based on thoughts and mindsets that you've developed from the day you were in the womb up until yesterday, essentially. She says if a person's non-conscious part of their mind is filled with negative, toxic trash, that is what is going to be forming your decisions that you're making today, and the other way around as well. If it's been filled with healthy, solid thinking choices, it's going to determine healthy choices that you are making today. It makes them much easier. So she said the opposite of toxicity is health, of course. Most of the time we're a mix of healthy and toxic, right? Everybody's a balance. Nobody's typically one way or the other, and we're at different parts, and this is where don't compare your journey with someone else because we've all had different experiences coming at us and chosen, it's not like there's just one way or the highway. There's so many different branches and so many routes to getting to where we are today. And so when we chat about this later on in the chat and when we're sharing, take it honestly as someone sharing, but don't be like, oh, they're already that much further ahead of me. You know what? Step 2 for them when they deal with a different thought might bog them down way more than it did for you because we're coming at it. So this is a journey that we can't compare. She says, I have this underlined. I suggest write it or underline it at the bottom of 133. You cannot sit back and wait to be happy and healthy and to have a great thought life. You have to make the choice to actually make this happen. I'm going to relate that to our plexus goals because that's how we all met. You can't. My business coach said the other day, your action has, how did he say this? Basically, your intent and your action have to meet up because we can all have intent. Who doesn't want to go to Hawaii? You'd be crazy. I would think you were crazy if you didn't say, yeah, I would love a trip to Hawaii, right? Of course we all want that, and we all can say it, but does the action behind your intent match? And that's where we lose people because it's very easy to say in all areas like, yeah, of course I want that. Of course I want to go to bed by 10 o'clock so that my mind can get the best rest. But do I actually do it? Me, typically not. I'm working on it, right? And so she says you can be overwhelmed by every small setback in life, or you can be energized by the possibilities that it brings. If I had symbols, I'd go ting. That's one of my favorite lines so far in the book, right? You can either be overwhelmed by all these little things that happen, all the setbacks in life, or you can be energized by the possibilities, right, that this brings for you, that you can change the entire direction of your mindset and your life and your goals and your family life, your personal life. So she talks on 135, the end of chapter 8. I better watch the time. She says there are 8 things that she's going to always be referring back to that we've now covered in the first, essentially what she calls part 1 of her book. So mind controls matter. Okay, that's huge. I think that we've understood now. Choice in your multiple perspective advantage. Okay, so we get to make the choices, and it is all based on perspective. Your choices change your brain, literally. Catching your thoughts, so just becoming aware of them so that you can make a choice on what to do with them. Entering into directed rest. That was probably one of the most important things we've talked about so far. I'm still practicing to take that uninterrupted 20-30 minutes. That 20-30 minutes goes for a long time. Yesterday after supper, my husband and I had a 25-minute nap. I never do that. And it was at such a weird time at like 6:30 in the evening. But I can tell today that I took a little bit more rest yesterday. Stop milkshake multitasking. It is a myth. Multitasking is not effective. We've been led to believe that it is. It's not. You are not super mom, super wife. If you are a multitasker, it's actually quite the opposite. We are believing a lie from culture that the more we do, the better we are. Not true. Thinking, God, and the quantum physics brain. Okay, so she's going to refer back to that a lot. That's what this is based on. And the science of thought. So all, of course, backed up by scientific principles. And we are now going to move into the actual 21-day brain detox. So this was part 2. Does anyone have any quick thoughts or questions about anything in part 1 before we move on? You can just wave a hand. Are you good? Thumbs up if you're good. Good? Okay. Liking the book so far? Yeah. Okay. Ready to clean out the junk? Okay. So chapter 9. Page 139. And so this is what the 21-day brain detox plan actually is. So she's first going to explain it, her reasonings behind it, and then next week we're going to go through steps 1 through 5. So next week will be really, really important to be on. You won't want to miss it. So she says the biggest part about this, and often the hardest, is achieving. Right? Achieving peak happiness. That's what we're all striving for in life, right? We all want to be happy. We want to be healthy. We want to thrive. And she says achieving them is not accomplished by putting on a brave or happy face, nor is it attained by adopting an ostrich mentality and pretending that your problems don't exist or that everything will always be great. Kind of that word faith. Those things are important in terms of sometimes that's how we cope. If I just kind of shelve it, don't think about it, maybe it'll go away, or maybe I can just overcome it. And that's why a lot of people get stuck, because we don't actually go through the hard stuff because we're trying to protect ourselves from feeling the emotion, but you have to feel to actually get through and to deal with it. And it's hard. You essentially have to go through the fire to burn off the ropes of bondage, right? So she says we can actively choose happiness. And she says to detox your thought life, you need to remember that it's your thinking that will actually change your brain on a physical level. You control your brain does not control you. So write that down too. I control my brain does not control me. And that is very, very freeing. She said the 5 steps switch on your brain learning process, right? It's a brain sequence. So it's going to be a sequence of events that are actually, remember I said before, you're not going to be able to see physically or tangibly every change that's happening because so much of it, remember that 90 to 99% is on our non-conscious mind. So it's going to be interesting as we chat through this and as we get going, right? Because you're going to be like, I don't really see anything happening, but we are going to be dedicated and we are going to do the steps every single day like she says, because we won't be able to see physically with our eyes. She says this is significantly, statistically significant and scientifically proven technique. So when she did this, they were doing scans and brain scans. She goes through a lot of different examples. We won't read through them all, and you guys can read through them, but just examples of different, types and groups of people that they did this with in different countries, not just that perfect test group, and the results, not only how they were reacting in life, but also the tests, right, and the scans and what was actually happening on a brainwave level. So she says, when you see choosing to change your mind and to learn as a heavy burden, you miss out on opportunity in front of you. And that comes back to how are we perceiving it? Do we want to just hide behind our insecurities, or do we want to step out and really change? So she says, when you see choosing to change your mind and to learn is a wonderful privilege, suddenly you see the opportunity. I've been using the word privilege with my kids a lot lately, right? Somebody says, well, I don't want to. You know what? It's actually a privilege. It's not a mommy says you have to. This is actually a privilege, especially with school. It is a privilege to have all these beautiful books that you can learn from because not everybody has them. So it's not if they're seeing it as, oh, I just have to, it's one more thing I'm being mandated to do. Well, guess what? Who as a kid wants to be told to do one more thing? But if they see it, it's all perception. If they see it as, wow, I'm lucky to have this, all of a sudden they're like, maybe I do want to look at that book. And it's a different type of a mindset. And so for me, that's one thing I'm trying to instill in them on many different areas, that it's a privilege. So then chapter 10, like 9 was really short, and basically, I'm not going to repeat it all, but it's we can control our minds. We can do this. This is a proven method. And then in chapter 10, she talks about how and why this is going to work. So she says the 21-day brain detox plan technique is a rigorous, disciplined daily routine. The word rigorous was like, whoa, what am I signing up for? But she's saying rigorous because controlling your thoughts takes a lasso. It's not something that's going to be like, this is so easy. Our minds are really powerful, really powerful. It's like trying to overcome food cravings for chips and chocolate at 9 at night when you're just ravenous. You got to fight with boxing gloves on to stay out of the chocolate chip bag or whatever it is in the house. So she means rigorous by it is going to take a little bit of sweat. Your daily routine is going to take about 7 to 10 minutes a day. I think we can all do that. I waste way more time scrolling social media, and this is going to be way more important for me. So she says sometimes some people like to go longer. So you're going to find what works best for you. During this time, you will be doing 5 steps every single day for 21 days. I think we can do that. On page 148, she says you can do up to 17 21-day brain detox cycles in a year. And your year is going to start, now we're reading this book. I would say that we're going to by beginning of September 1, we're going to be starting our 21 days, right? You can start it whenever you want, but that's when your year would start. And she talks about research shows that deep thinking exercises repeated daily over a period of 21 days actually creates long-lasting change. So you're breaking a really bad habit and seeding a new one. And she says, who needs this? Everyone. Everyone needs this. Doesn't matter the age. Nobody is exempt from mind issues. I mean, we see mind issues coming up in kids younger and younger, right? In school, whether it be anxiety, ADD, whatever it is, worry, fear. She says the switch on your brain technique sequence is this. We're going to gather. And remember, we're going to talk about these all next week, okay? So I'm not going to get in depth here, but the 5 steps are you're going to gather, There'll be focused reflection. You're going to write, you're going to revisit, and you're going to have active reach. So what you'll be doing with 5 steps is bringing toxic thoughts into consciousness. Does that sound a little bit like, Those toxic thoughts, we are going to actually be pulling them out and bringing them to the conscious mind. They're going to be very real. You're going to be very aware with them, but it's going to be very, very good. And then she says, over 21 days, we will proceed to destroy them. We're going to war with our thoughts. We will destroy them. We will annihilate and assassinate them because mind controls matter. At the same time, you're going to grow a healthy new thought to replace the toxic one, right, during that 21 days. Now, she says you can only work on one thought network each cycle, which makes sense. Otherwise, it would be so overwhelming. And she says we're going to break down the toxic one and then simultaneously create and plant the new healthy one. So you can repeat the cycle if you feel you didn't fully deal with that thought, and that's going to happen. It may take 2 or 3 cycles to really, if there's one that's just really serious and embedded, it'll take a few cycles. And she says that is fine, because sometimes it can take till you're in day like 4 or 5 to discover, oh, that thought actually has a root that's a different one that I got to first deal with. And she says it's okay. You just continue on right there for the remainder of your 20 days, and you may then have to do the cycle over again, but don't just quit and unravel. Keep going. And then she says if you don't, use a memory. So we are going to be bringing the toxic one out, putting a new healthy one in, right? Those are memories that became ingrained as thoughts. So if you don't use the memory, the proteins it's made from will denature and the memory will disassemble. So that's what we're going to do with the toxic ones that are lies. We're not going to allow them. We're going to, every time it comes to consciousness, we're going to be like, no. And we're not going to allow it to have any type of momentum. And then it will physically actually begin to deteriorate in our brains on a neurological level. So whatever you think about is going to grow the most. And we're going to be consciously thinking about the new healthy thought. She says you may also just feel at the end of a cycle that the toxic thought was so dominant that it warrants working on it for another 21 days, which we were just saying, because sometimes there's just lots of guilt and condemnation, insecurity attached to some of them, right? Sometimes she says the I can't mindset will keep you from progressing, and it's going to take 2 to 3 cycles to be able to work through that, and that's okay. Don't be hard on yourself. Be so encouraged that you're taking a step right now to actually be willing to change and to be willing to work through that. That's hard, and most people never ever get to that. So if you're even here, that's already huge. So I wrote at the top of my page, pay more attention to the new healthy memory than the toxic one. And that's where we're going to see the rewiring happening. And it'll take some active choices. The work doesn't end at 21 days. So at the end of the 21-day cycle, the toxic thought is gone. Okay. And the new healthy thought is there. But it's going to be like a new little seedling, a new little plant. Is it going to survive on its own and just magically grow into a solid new line of thinking? No. You will still have to continue to water it and to nurture it and to actively choose to dwell on it. So she says our thinking is that nurturing. So it means if you don't practice using that new thought, it will also, right, deteriorate. It's very possible that your mind will shift back to the regrowing of the toxic thought. So this is the process of getting it started, getting it seeded, and then we have to continue on. And every day, here comes in the affirmations. You just affirm that new thought, affirm it, hardwire it in, and then you'll notice that when you're doing that, you will make daily choices that kind of go alongside that thought that you're seeding. So to avoid the regrowing of the toxic thought, you want to make a conscious effort to practice using that new thought as much as you can until it becomes automatic, like riding a bike, and then you'll move on to the next one. Proteins, this is interesting for those of you that like the science and the anatomy part. Proteins change progressively by day 21, with peak changes happening at day 7 to 14. That's really interesting. That's not that far in, day 7. She says to become a self-sustaining protein, which are like long-term memories. This applies in both negative and positive directions, so it can work either way. If after wiring out a toxic thought, you've stopped using the healthy new thought and revert back to the toxic thinking, you reverse the process that you went through in the first place. It's kind of like keto eating. If you cheat halfway through your 21 days, you literally have to start over. It is so not worth the cheat. Because then what if you're on day like 17 and you did all that hard work and now you go grab some croutons or I don't know what in the pantry because you want something crunchy or some chips. You just unraveled all that hard work you did, so it's not worth it. On the bottom of page 154, she said this 21-day plan is going to work best when you set the challenge just beyond the edge of your comfort zone. Where have you heard that before? Getting outside our comfort zone. That's when the biggest, often your successes are literally just over the line. And if you can step just outside where it feels like just a little bit squirmy, that is where all of a sudden you are walking into huge potential and huge change. And so that takes us to the beginning of the first steps, which we are going to go through next week. It is the long weekend, and I'm going to let you off the hook a little bit earlier than last time. So we are going to go through the 5 steps next week. If you have the book, read through them now already. It's only going to give you an advantage to next week and give you a bit of it's nice to have an idea before we actually get going on what it's going to look like. And you might want to start already thinking about jot down, what are some of those recurring thoughts that are toxic to me right now? It could be, I don't know how to be a leader, or nobody listens to what I say, or Plexus products are too expensive. Do you know that thought and belief in yourself is affecting the people you're talking to? You don't even have to say it. They can feel it. It might be, I'm not good enough, or I'll never be able to be like her, right? Number one, I don't want you to be like anybody else. It reeks when people do that. You can see it from a mile away. I want you to be like you. And it's just figuring that out. It might be, I don't know. Are there any thoughts that you guys can think of that you're consciously aware of, or any examples that I'm missing that would be big ones for people? Did I list all the main ones? You guys can unmute now if you like.
Yeah, I think you said many of them, but always like I can't, or I'm not worth it. Something's wrong with me.
Yeah. I don't know if I ever will. It works for her, but probably won't for me. Right?
Or even this morning when I was doing my devotions, it's like I was reading how, I'll forget the names now, Priscilla and Aquila were talking to a man who was preaching the right things, but not quite the right way. But just the way they approached him and set him straight, it's like, I wish I could be like that. I wrote that down. Okay, Bev, you wish. Now, how are you going to change that wish into what are you going to do about it? Right?
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. It's are we going to spend the rest of our life just wishing? Or are we going to actually do something about it? I love that, because it's easy to have intent. It is easy to have intent, and that would be nice if. Okay, great. So you've recognized the problem. What are you going to do about it? Right? Whether that be any area of life. I'm not even going to relate it specific to Plexus, even though I think that is a huge one, but in any area of life, right? Okay, I have this goal. I really want to be this by this date. Great. I love that you've recognized that, but what are you going to do about it? How are you going to get there? Because just saying it, right? What's that line? A wish is only a wish, right? Without a plan of action, basically. You have to have a plan of action. That could be being a better mom, wife, being better in your job, hitting your Plexus goals, whatever that is. If you don't have a written down plan of action, I'm going to give you a little tip from the top. I have started literally writing down and scripting everything, because I'm feeling and noticing it took me 3 years to figure this out. So I'm going to help you now. That sometimes the intent is there. I do not doubt the intent is there. The want to is there. I believe that with my full heart. The problem is people freeze and it's like they've been hit by a taser and they do nothing because they don't know what to do, even though we're like, well, there's like 200 posts on how to do IPA. It's still like they just get tasered. There's too many. I don't know what to do. This is why we're simplifying right down to the calendar. We are going to do everything together. So what I've started doing, okay, Super Silvers, I hope you guys get in a chat. If you need to be in one, let me know. I've started a Going Super Silver chat for those that are actually wanting to go Super Silver. And for those in my own virtual office, I have written down so-and-so, this is what you need to do this month, not just let's go Super Silver. Awesome. No, you need to get this many to order. You need to add this many new ones between these levels, right? This is what you need to do. And on our new iPay challenges, we are going to be providing scripts, actual scripts on, listen, this is what's coming up. Here's what you're going to copy, paste, and send. That we can all do because we need to build up the I can do this, not I'm tasered because I don't even know what to send, so I'm sending nothing at all. So we're going to be doing this much differently. I think it's going to be helpful. And we just need to just link arms as leaders. So for your downline that you have, when you're like, why aren't you on the Zoom? Did you invite anybody to the next event? Probably try to see it from their perspective. They're probably just like, I don't even know where to start, so I'm doing nothing. So hold hands. Emily Gibson and Brooke Hemingway do this amazing. They literally hold hands with every single person until they're strong enough to fly. And so we're going to do that. Yeah. So next week, we're going to start first with the thought processes so that we can, get our own thoughts in the right direction. We can learn how that affects so much else so that we can now help others. Because as leaders, we are going to be blessed so that we can now turn around and bless others. And next week, we're going to go through that 5-step process on what that looks like. So again, Saturday at 10 a.m. And yeah, we will put the recording up so that everybody who's missing it, keep tagging your people. The post gets lost a little bit, but keep tagging them so that they can all benefit because this is life skill, right? So much outside of work. It's just a life skill. Yeah. So thank you to all of you guys who were on here on the Zoom, and we will see you next week.